Many of these students, we as Californians have been investing in them K through 12th. Today, in an era where the tech industry is telling us, biotech industry, and industries across California are telling us, we do not have enough human capital with the skills to serve our needs, and that's why we're farming out to other countries. We're gonna walk away from the investment that we put into our young people. We can't do that. Most of these students are at the top of their class, and many of them are graduating valedictorians. We cannot be hypocritical to our investment. We cannot do a disservice to the taxpayers of California and walk away from an investment that we know on a basic level will quadruple in its value. Members, I ask you to do the right thing. Stand by Californians, stand by our citizens.
On October 8th last year, Governor Jerry Brown signed into law the California DREAM Act, giving minors who were brought to this country as unauthorized immigrants the opportunity to receive financial aid. Mr. Donnelly, it's not the first bill that, as you said, gives incentives to illegal immigrants. There was actually precursors to this bill in 2002. Can you tell us a little bit about Assembly Bill 540?
Sure. AB 540 it was the original DREAM Act here in California. What it does is it grants in-state tuition to anyone who has come here illegally as long as they go to a high school for 3 years. And that's a very generous subsidy. It's essentially a 2/3 discount off your tuition. When I came here from University of Michigan and transferred into California, I had to pay the out-of-state tuition until I established legal residency. It's 3 times the tuition.
So why is the DREAM Act, as you've renamed it, really the Nightmare Act?
Well, this is the DREAM Act Part 3, really, because Part 2 gave private funds. That was AB 130, which the governor signed on the back of my seatmate, Assemblymember Gil Cedillo, to much fanfare. And that opened up the ability for students who are here illegally to get private funds and also to get Board of Governor waivers. And that kind of slipped under the radar. Well, if you don't have the resources, if you can prove that you're basically poor, you get an absolute free education, everything paid for. And of course, if you're coming from a country where you don't have any provable assets, well, you can imagine what that magnet is going to do in terms of impacting the already overcrowded college system that we have. So when he signed AB 131 on October 8th, as you said, I filed a referendum 2 days later, the following Monday morning. Within the first 24 hours, I got 5,000 emails. 40% were from Hispanics, Americans of Hispanic descent who were outraged. 20% were from hardcore liberal Democrats. This kind of harkens back to Prop 187, where we saw Republicans actually sweep into the majority because you had a huge coalition of people, a very unlikely coalition, people from all different political viewpoints. And in our case, when it was surrounded just on college, people really deeply personalized it. And we were getting emails from people, huge number of immigrants from every country in the world. People would pull up to our signature gathering drives, and I'd have an 80-year-old grandmother with her 18-year-old grandson. They probably don't have anything in common politically, and yet here they are signing it. We've had people who are extraordinarily wealthy and people who are really struggling, and yet they're all united because this is about their kids. And we have a fundamental human yearning as parents. We want our kids to do better than us.
Okay, so outside of the issue of fairness, and it's a big issue, but what is wrong with Assemblyman Hernandez's economic argument that investing in students that have been here, that go to college, would actually quadruple our economy?
Well, first of all, it's a specious argument. There was no facts offered. There was absolutely nothing to back it up. There is no scientific principle that somehow the dreamers are somehow better than the rest of American students. It's just nonsense. They just made it up. And if you call anyone out on that, they start calling you names. Now, there was a very interesting article recently discussing how we are actually recruiting out-of-state students to take spots in school because they'll pay 3 times the tuition to make up for those who won't, including the illegals that we've let in and invited in, but also that we have foreign students, particularly from China, who have the exact requirements that Assemblyman Hernandez was talking about. But you notice he never mentioned that. What we really need to fix is not create a pathway for people to come here illegally and then sort of live off the citizens by getting handouts like the DREAM Act. But what we ought to be doing is fixing our immigration system, where we bring somebody in from China, they get a tremendous education. They pay for it, so that helps subsidize the college for everybody else. But then we don't have any way for them to stay, so we drive them back out and they go back to China, create a great company, one of those biotech companies or a software company.
I think you're referring to the BRAIN Act. I think that's being introduced by Representative Griffin from Arkansas, where he would like to increase the number of visas for people to stay here. But in terms of the students that are already here, the minors that are already here, that for most intents and purposes call this their country, what is wrong with giving them an opportunity to finish their education?
Well, first of all, absolutely nothing. And we give them a tremendous opportunity. As a matter of fact, we bend over backwards. Let me give you an example. I grew up with 14 brothers and sisters, and I paid my way through a private high school because that was the only way I saw that I was ever going to make it to college. I applied for loans and grants and financial aid, and then I got something that, you know, we don't even hear about anymore. I got a job. And you know what I did? I worked my way and paid my way through college. Now, why would I want to stand in the way of someone who professes they want to become an American? That's the American dream, is you work your way, you earn your way. You don't get handouts. We've become a handout society. And that's not the fault of these kids. I have nothing against these kids. I've met with them. I've got a tremendous amount of empathy for them. But Assemblyman Cedillo's bill does not deal just with these kids. It is an open-ended entitlement. So if you haven't come to the country illegally yet, what's going to happen a decade from now when we've invited in another 1 million, 2 million, or 10 to 12 million more illegals to come either from out of the country or from all the other states? As a matter of fact, I just heard the other day, there was a fellow who works for a friend of my brother's who said one of his guys quit, and he's here illegally because he's going to California to get free tuition. I think what we're doing is we are destroying what makes California great when we tell people, hey, come here the wrong way, we'll make it all okay. And by the way, you don't even have to be a kid. You don't have to even go through one of our high schools. You could come here, be 30 years old, get a GED, and the AB 131 DREAM Act applies to you.
Well, there's also a federal version, the American DREAM Act, and that one does provide a path to citizenship. So if students go to the current version bandied around in Congress saying if students go to college for 2 years or they serve in the military, they would be granted conditional residency. Are you in favor of such a proposal?
You know, I'm not. I find the part about serving in the military to be an interesting possibility because I think that certainly shows a real commitment to becoming an American. I think we have made becoming a citizen too easy, and we've made all these excuses for people who came here the wrong way, and we're shielding them from the consequences. I mean, they really ought to be talking to their parents, and they ought to be saying, how do I get in line and do this the right way? What's the process? And there's a process, but it's painful. It requires going back to your home country. It requires meeting certain obligations. It requires showing respect, you know, for the laws and rules of this country. And the process exists. I think it's time for some respect to start coming back the other way. And when it does, I think you'll get more of the American people excited. But right now, I think that whole proposal is dead on arrival.
All right, so that's bad legislation in your view. So kind of a broad question. So there's AB 131, there's the first version of the DREAM Act, AB 540. Let's say those are bad pieces of legislation. What is the solution to illegal immigration?
The real solution that I see is it comes in a couple of parts. The first thing is we have to turn off the magnets. Literally go after employers and say, we're going to hold you to the law. That means e-verify for every employer in the state of California, period. I know we just went the opposite direction, but we need to go there. Number two, we need to cut off all non-emergency cash benefits, you know, taxpayer-paid benefits. These are huge, huge attractions. Once we've cut off the entitlements, we need to physically secure the border. We need to do that for a number of reasons, one of which is national security, and I'm not talking about terrorists. I'm talking about the drug cartels and the war that they're waging. So we physically secure the border to the extent possible after we've turned off the magnets. Then what we do is we allow market forces to work. And we see if people will voluntarily take themselves back to their country of opportunity as opposed to coming to a country and being attracted to a country where previously they were given handouts and given jobs.
So you would agree that it's not a realistic option to extricate 11 to 15 million illegal immigrants that are in this country?
I think that it makes a lot more sense to try to use market forces. The problem has developed over many decades. It is going to take a period of time for us to work it out. I think that anyone who has committed a crime, who is a criminal that is here illegally, we ought to be finding those people, tracking them down, and deporting them. Absolutely. Anyone who is serving time in our prisons right now, who is taking up precious tax dollars that we could be spending on fixing our K through 12 or higher education system, it shouldn't be that hard to find a way to deport them and get them to serve their sentences in their home country without all the problems that have occurred with that idea in the past.
All right, so where can people learn more about AB 131, the current status of the referendum, or about yourself, Assemblyman Donnelly?
Well, to find out about me, you can go on my website. It's just Donnelly for Assembly, so it's DONNELLY for Assembly, FOR.com. And the referendum on AB 131 is just stopab131.com.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. It's been a pleasure, and we'll be back.